Welcome in, everybody. It is the Wrestling Mat, and today I'm going to tell you a story about the greatest family rivalry in the history of professional wrestling. 30 years ago today, the match happened. SummerSlam 1994, the WWF champion Bret Hitman Hart taking on the 1994 King of the Ring, the King of Hearts, Owen Hart, in a blue bar steel cage match with like the entire Hart family sitting ringside. 30 years ago today. It didn't main event the show. No, quite the opposite main event. Undertaker versus Undertaker. Let's just pretend that one didn't happen. Let's talk about a match that is, in my mind and a lot of people's mind, the greatest cage match of all time. As part of a story that had started the year prior. We're going to get into that today. It is a special retrospective episode of the Wrestling Mat 30 years ago, SummerSlam 1994. But I'm not going to tell just about that match. I'm going to talk about how we got there. God, that would be a good name for a show, wouldn't it? Anyway, how did we get to Bret and Owen? How do we get to Bret and Owen having a cage match without blood, without the right kind of violence? Or maybe not the typical violence that you would see in a cage match, and yet it is looked back so fondly because of what they were able to do, how they were able to structure the match, how the family was involved. How that story became part of my WWE hiring process. We're going to get to all of that on today's episode, and I'm so happy to have you here for this. Yes, I am aware. I don't typically do these, and I know we would be talking about, what's going on after a Wednesday night. This was a very special episode to me. It is something I had planned for quite some time because of what this match and feud means to me as a fan, what it means to the wrestling business, what it means to one of the most important wrestling families in the Hearts, the impact it had on me and still has on me. For those of you that were with us yesterday, I had said, please go back and watch SummerSlam 94 for the cage match. And if you haven't done so yet, watch it after this is all done. But this is the kind of stuff I wanted to do on this channel. And please be a subscriber at the WrestlingMatShow.com. Please be a member if you're not a member yet. I had members with us this week for the AMA we did on Monday. If you're at the top level, if you're all the way up, if you're a Mat eventer, you know what it looks like. B. May's a Mat eventer. He got a 30-minute Zoom with me on Tuesday. If you're with us after yesterday's live episode, we watched Monday Night Raw from March of 1997 from Germany. Bret and Triple H opened the show. Vader and Rocky Maivia for the Intercontinental Championship. Mankind challenges Sid for the WWF title, and none of those were the main event. The main event was Bulldog Owen as tag team champions. We're having issues facing each other for the European title. Culmination of a tournament that they had in Europe on a taped Raw. We watched all of that yesterday, and this weekend we are watching Bash at Berlin. If you're a Mat member, the WrestlingMatShow.com has all those details you just saw and much more, and you can hit join right down there. And because I have put this together ahead of time, I don't have access to chat today, so while we appreciate those super chats, fire them in there. I will see the chat after the fact, I promise, and they'll be answered. But you know how you can support. You can support us at the WrestlingMatShow.com by becoming a member, by subscribing, by telling people, by turning on the notifications, by leaving a comment. We appreciate all that. Everything you can do to support, whatever that may be, big or small, is appreciated here. We're trying to give you as much as you can, as we can give you as a member. But anything you can do to support the show is greatly appreciated. And on tomorrow's episode, we'll kind of get back to a little bit more normal. We'll talk about, Dynamite, and we'll talk about Bash at Berlin and preview all that stuff. But today, I will say that This is something that means a lot to me, and this is something I have a lot of passion about. And let's get into this story. So the Bret and Owen story. It starts in 1993. Bret had the feud with Jerry the King Lawler. Of course, Bret wins the 1993 King of the Ring after losing the championship at WrestleMania that year. That's all the Hogan BS and whatever. But Bret wins King of the Ring, and Lawler immediately attacks him, and here we go. He's the king, Burger King, all that stuff. So that leads to the King's Court, the Knights, whatever the hell you want to call them, along with Lawler, taking on the Hart family. Bret, Owen, Bruce, and Keith. Well, Jerry the King Lawler has some issues, and that's a story for another time. So Shawn Michaels has to step in as part of the team. In the match, in which, by the way, they all had the same Owen-style singlet. And Bret wore it too, which is so weird. Like seeing Bret's legs was like, wait, no, Bret wears tights. And during the match, there's a spot where Owen and Bret collide. Mind you, Helen's there, Stu Hart's there, the parents, and Owen gets eliminated. And the Harts go on to win the match, and Owen's the only one eliminated. And there's issue. And they're celebrating the ring, and Stu's in there. And Owen's pissed, and he's mad. And Stu's got to be peacemaker, and Helen's crying. And that begins a jealousy of Owen and Bret. And Owen changes his tights. And he starts using the sharpshooter. And he challenges Bret. And Bret won't do it. Am I fighting my brother? So obviously, Survivor Series, happening in November, happening around Thanksgiving. They air something. I love it. This is such perfect 1994 WWF. They air a clip that Bret and Owen have made up over the holidays, as I said, as families do. Water under the bridge, all that kind of stuff. It's a great clip. I actually watched it on YouTube yesterday. And they start tagging together. Which Bret hasn't, I mean, think about it, Bret hasn't done since, he's in the Hart Foundation. And they get the title shot against the Quebecers at Royal Rumble 1994. And Bret gets hurt during the match. Well, Rumble 94 is a very angle-heavy show, including this. So Bret gets injured, hurts his knee, continues to battle on, can't make the tag. Owen's getting frustrated, and they stop the match. Bret can't continue. His knee is messed up. What are they going to do? And they lose. So they lose. And Owen, he's yelling at him. He's berating him. And then he kicks that leg. And Bret is in bad shape. And they're taking Owen away from ringside, and they capture him. And there's the old TV screens, that 16 TV screen monitor thing that they had. It all flashed up, very 90s. And Owen is cutting the promo. Famously says, "I kicked your leg out of your leg." And he's cutting this promo, and what they do is they go from showing the full screen of that to the shot of those screens over the entranceway with Bret coming down the aisle or getting brought back because he's so injured. And it's a great image of Owen basically berating Bret in this promo, almost like it made like he was looking down on him from the video wall as Bret is getting taken out. And that's it. There is no coming back from that. So Bret gets taken out. He's out of the match. He can't be in the he can't continue. They lose the match. They don't win the tag titles. The holiday reconciliation is out the window. Owen is a full-fledged heel, and he hates Bret. He hurt his brother. The youngest son of the family went after the most successful one because of jealousy. And he hurt him even more when he was already injured. So we get to the Royal Rumble. And there's a spot in the Rumble where nobody comes out. And the assumption on commentary is that, well, that was Bret's spot. Bret couldn't make it out. He's too injured. Great bit of storytelling. I mean, how this intertwines. And then later on, Bret does come out. And the place goes nuts. And he limps down the ring. And it's revealed that the other spot was Bastion Booger, and he got sick or whatever. So Bret's in it to the end, and obviously, or if you don't know, I'll tell it. Bret and Luger go over the top rope at the same time. It's a tie. They take enough for different angles. One ref holds up Bret. One ref holds up Lex, and back and forth. And what's going on? And I love Fink. Fink's going to make the announcement. The winner of the 1994 Royal Rumble. Who is it again? And then they boo, and they bleed this out, and they stretch it out. And then, Vince, I think this is going to be the angle. We're told this is the one. You just can't tell. Now, it looks like Lex, because he's taller, goes over. But I interviewed Lex, I think earlier this year, I guess it was, and talking to him, he goes, man, Bret was so good about that. And, for all the knocks against Lex, and Bret put him over to me. I interviewed Bret about Lex a couple years ago. He's like, Lex was in a tough spot. He had to follow Hulk Hogan. That's really hard to do. And because of that, I felt for the guy. And, I think he understood that the booking wasn't great at SummerSlam 93 and all that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. And Lex was so appreciative of what Bret did for him. And we showed him a clip of that. And Lex got, emotional about how much Bret appreciated him. And I actually thought that was always a nice thing. And that brings us, of course, to where we're going to go with WrestleMania. It's not in your house time yet. Owen is so established now as a big heel. He's up against Bret, all this stuff's going on. But Bret has now, from earlier in the night, getting his leg kicked out from under his leg, or whatever the hell Owen said, and being in kind of a mid-card thing with the tag titles, and just kind of taking care of his little brother. Hey, we'll tag together. We'll get the tag titles, and they don't win them. And then Owen is now firmly established as a real piece of garbage for what he did to Bret, who's obviously still beloved. But Bret perseveres. And what else happens? Bret wins the Royal Rumble. He ties with Lex, but he wins the Rumble. So what do? Well, they set up the coin toss on Raw. And here was the deal. They spelled all this out. And I think this is something they could bring back. There's a coin toss. But they know ahead of time. Both men. They did a whole Jack Tunney BS, Furthermore, they know. Here's the deal. They're both getting title shots. It's a matter of who gets the first one. The champion will wrestle twice. Yoko walks in as champion. So if Lex wins the coin toss, he gets the first shot at Yoko, and Bret will face Owen. Just so everybody wrestles twice. And regardless of the outcome of Bret and Owen, and regardless of the outcome of Lex and Yoko, Bret will still get his title shot against whoever wins Lex and Yoko. But if Bret wins the coin toss, Bret gets the first title shot against Yoko. And Lex would face Crush. So he would wrestle twice. Well, they do the coin toss and get the big reaction from Lex. So we know, and it's a better story anyway. Lex, Yoko is the first title match at WrestleMania 10. Bret will wrestle Owen, and regardless of what happens between Bret and Owen, Bret will face the winner of Lex and Yoko. So now you have Bret chasing the WWF Championship. And you also have the story of Owen facing Bret at WrestleMania. You could not set things up better with multiple prongs of a story at the same time. And so that brings us to the match. So this match opens WrestleMania 10. Now, obviously, it's a big deal because it's WrestleMania 10. It is think where they were WrestleMania 1 at Madison Square Garden. They're now back at the Garden for the first time since WrestleMania 1. WrestleMania 10, a lot of spectacle, multiple title matches. We know about the ladder match with Shawn and Razor, which is going to come into play later in this story. A little behind the scenes on that one. But Bret opened the show. And you could tell the personal animosity, and Bret had to get to that point where he was pushed into this, but okay, I'm going to do it. And these two have what I believe is the greatest opening match in wrestling history on a pay-per-view. It is technically sound. There is cheating in the right spots by Owen. There's some great use of the camera angle with the camera above the ring. There's a spot where Owen pulls Bret's hair and Bret kind of admonishes him like a big brother to a little brother. But it's also two pros. Two absolute pros putting on a wrestling match that fit the story. Now, Bret's already established as a WWF champion at this point. And him winning makes sense. You got to build him up to the title match later on. Who knew if he was going to win or not? But instead, they have a great back-and-forth affair. And Owen cheats a little bit here and there, but he's matching Owen. And there's the thought of, well, he's the younger, quicker brother, but Bret's got the experience. And they get to the finish, and they do the victory roll. But it's hung on by Owen, and Owen pins him. Not with a finish, not with a sharpshooter, not with a spinning heel kick. He out-wrestles Bret, and he beats him. And it's a huge win, and commentary goes nuts for it because Owen beat Bret. And now Bret, with a loss to open the show, has to now wait to see who he's going to face. Lex Luger or Yokozuna. And Owen cuts another great promo. And I remember watching this pay-per-view days after during lunchtime of third grade because my lunch lady was a big wrestling fan. So she taped it. We watched it over 3 days. We watched that first. And Owen cuts that promo with the spit down her face. And I remember her in her Jersey accent. Owen, get the spit off your face. I mean, come on. It looks ridiculous. But I remember the spittle on Owen's face. He was so fired up about beating Bret. And he's in the most famous hallway that so many of the greats had walked with Pettengill. And he beat him. I beat you, Bret. I beat you. So later on, Yoko and Luger had the match, and Perfect's the special guest referee. And, there's the rumor that Lex was supposed to win, and they shot that episode of Superstars before Mania with Lex with the title. And Bruce Pritchard will tell you that was to work, the Meltzers of the world. Or maybe Lex was supposed to win that night. But instead, Perfect comes out as the ref, and Luger's messing with Fuji and Jim Cornette, and it's a smudge finish. And Perfect is like, you got to respect me because I'm the ref. And that's it with Lex. 1 year later, it's him and Bulldog as the Allied Powers going up against the Blue Brothers, and he's gone. So this was the second chance of SummerSlam 1993. Okay, Luger's back after that terrible booking. And now we do a messy finish, and Yoko remains champion. Short match, ugly match, doesn't matter. So the main event is now Yoko Bret. By the way, happening after Shawn and Razor tear the house down in the first major ladder match. Bret and Shawn had one for Coliseum Home Video to show it off. And it was supposed to be Bret's match. But Shawn and Razor get it, and it really becomes more of a Shawn match. And they tear the house down. So two of the best matches you're ever going to see happen on the same show. Bret and Owen open the show. Razor and Shawn for the IC title later on. But the main event is Bret and Yoko, much like it was the year prior. This year, though, Rowdy Piper's the referee. It's nothing special. The shake on the ropes, whatever, and Yoko falls and Bret beats him and he's the champ. And everybody comes out to celebrate with him and Vince. But the closing shot is from down the aisle. It's everybody celebrating the ring. I think it's Macho opening the ropes for him. And it's Owen standing in the aisle. Here's another chance to reconcile. Bret's moment, but Owen is there. And WrestleMania 10 ends with a tease of what's to come for the rest of the summer. Not the big moment of just Bret celebrating and we'll follow up on Raw. Or we'll follow up on Superstars. No, they do it right there. And it is such a beautifully shot ending of everybody and the crowd and the baby faces celebrating with Bret. The special guests that were there, Burt Reynolds, all that stuff. Turturro, you name it. They all come in the ring. And Owen's by himself. It's a beautiful visual. Because Owen beat him. And that should have been his night. But Bret is the one who's on top when the night's over. But Owen had that win now. So we move on. And we get the second ever King of the Ring pay-per-view. Bret faces Diesel. Owen is in the King of the Ring. Bret comes out with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Hey, the Hart Foundation to wrestle Diesel. Anvil gets Bret DQ'd at King of the Ring. Bret's like, what are you doing? Owen's in the finals against Razor. Here comes Neidhart again. Well, he's a babyface. He's with Bret. He takes out Razor. Owen wins King of the Ring. It's a ruse the whole time. Neidhart's with Owen. The former partner of Bret, now with the younger brother. And Owen becomes King of the Ring, King of Hearts, and here we go. The King of Hearts is born. And Owen makes the challenge for SummerSlam. And Bret accepts it. And there's some great stuff in there on Raw. There's also a famous promo in the King's Court with Bruce berating Owen with Neidhart in there, and he just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks. And it's a good example of why Bret wanted it to be Owen and not Bruce. But the other part of this is it leads with the challenge to them having a cage match. And the idea was not to keep them in, but to keep the whole family out. Mostly Neidhart. But as Bret has told the story, he wanted to have a ladder match with Owen. That went away because of WrestleMania 10. And then on top of that, Vince is dealing with issues of violence and all that, and they can't do a blood cage match. They can't do a violent cage match. So they make a point to say that the cage was to keep the family out. It's not about using the cage, and they don't use the cage. There's no blood. So they make the whole match about, well, what's one of the rules? Escape the cage. And I think that can be a crappy snip on that match. But instead, because Bret says it, I don't hate you, Owen. It's almost like I got to put you in your place. They build the whole match around dramatic escapes. Not to get away from each other. Not for Owen to be scared of Bret. It's about who's the better man. Well, who's the better man in this match? How do you win the match? You escape the cage. You go over the top. You go through the door. And the drama with the family watching and the return of Bulldog and Diana's there and Neidhart's sitting with them and Bruce and Stu and everybody's there. Bulldog's back 2 years after him and Bret tear the house down at Wembley at SummerSlam 92. And the family's there. The whole thing is, well, the cage is there, so these two cannot be interrupted, and they have to settle the sibling rivalry, and the WWF Championship is on the line. And the last time they faced, Owen beat Bret at WrestleMania. He's got the one-up. And they build it so well with so much drama. And Bret's leg gets worked in the match, and it gets ripped up in the cage, torn up, and Owen works it. And they hit that big superplex, and you watch the ring. It doesn't move. It doesn't move. Because it is like cement in there. And that could have been the finish. And as Bret's about to get out, you think it's over because a superplex is a big spot in a cage match in 1994. Owen stops him and brings him back in and gets the sharpshooter on Bret. Bret, it's not a tap-out match. It's not a pin submission cage. It is get out of that cage. That was the stip. That's why they built it around that. And it is masterful, the drama they built. And who better to get out of the sharpshooter than Bret Hart? And he reverses Owen's sharpshooter into one of his own. And then they fight over the side of the cage near where the family is. And they both get over the top. And at the end, Owen's leg gets caught. He's hanging upside down, and Bret gets out, and Bret wins. But then Anvil, right away, attacks Bulldog from behind and also hits Diana, which I believe Bret has said, pissed them off because that wasn't supposed to happen. And they both get knocked over, and Anvil and Owen get Bret back in the ring, and they're beating him up, and they and they're trying. Now the family's trying to get in. I think Bulldog loses a shoe, and Bruce is trying to get in. And they're fighting them off on the inside, and they're beating down Bret. And they finally get in, and they chase them off. So Bret wins. But it's the opposite of WrestleMania. He wins, but Owen stands tall at the end. But he's not the WWF champion. And this was supposed to, like I said, be a ladder match. And instead, it worked out even better. It is a beautifully done cage match, worked within the confines of the rules, with great drama, with a great payoff, with family involved, and it leaves the door open for more. The feud continues, of course, because Bob Backlund begins a feud with Bret Hart, and they have the submission, I quit, whatever you want to call it, match Survivor Series. And Owen is in Bob's corner with the towel that was thrown in on him with the Iron Sheik back in the 80s. And Bulldog is in Bret's corner. And there's a chase around the ring, and Bulldog gets knocked out. So he can't throw the towel in. And Bret gets put in the chicken wing for 10 minutes. And Owen is pleading with Helen, his mom. You have to throw it in. You have to throw it in. It's Bret. And she finally does. And Owen laughs because now his conniving has taken the title away from Bret, and his conniving worked on his mother. So Owen gets another one up on Bret, and now the title is off of Bret. And, of course, a couple of days later, Diesel drops Backlund in a matter of seconds at MSG, and he's the champ. So we go back to Bret and Diesel now at the Royal Rumble. Ton of interference. Shawn Michaels, Jeff Jarrett, Road Dogg, Neidhart, Owen. It's a mess of a schmoz, and they call it a draw. And Bret finishes the feud unnecessarily with Backlund at WrestleMania. And they do a kind of blow off of Bret and Owen, but the problem was they never capitalized on how well they did with Owen. And of course, they would reunite in 1997 and start the Hart Foundation against Stone Cold Steve Austin. But that is a promo for another time because of what Bret does on that night. I'd love to revisit that down the road. Now, because of the effect that had on me as a kid and how much I love that story, on my WWE application, I was asked to tell, because of the job I was applying for, what my favorite storyline was in WWE history. And I did bring up Shawn Michaels' run from the Royal Rumble in 1995, the aforementioned Royal Rumble in 1995, all the way to him winning the championship at WrestleMania 12, a year plus. But I also brought up the idea of how much Bret and Owen was perfectly booked and such a great story, and I went into detail with it. And I'm sure that captured on some eyeballs of those looking at my application. And, hey, this is the wrestling nerd. We want this guy. But I still remember all that stuff so fondly, and it's etched in my brain. And it's very simple storytelling that I watch as an 8 and 9-year-old. And it would be good again today because Bret and Owen knew what they were doing, and it was masterfully crafted. And even when you don't get the ladder match and you get the cage, it was just two pros being pros. And Owen got such a big profile off of that. And unfortunately, he never reached anywhere near those heights again. Even when he reunited and did the stuff with Austin, in terms of title picture, yeah, he got that shot at at Shawn, but they didn't go with it after Bret left, and they probably should have. But I don't know if Vince ever saw Owen as that main eventer. But Bret sure as hell tried to do everything he could for Owen. And you know Owen's a great technician, and Owen was so good at being a chicken shit heel and playing his role. But man, he was good in the ring. And it was a sibling rivalry that didn't get violently personal. It just got personal. The runt of the family being jealous of the older brother who reached the top. It's a simple story. And it would take years for them to reunite. And like I said, that's a promo worth watching with Bret and Bulldog and Owen on Raw, bringing the family back together, but with a plan in mind. Go watch SummerSlam 1994 today. Watch that cage match. Watch two pros get it done. Wince when you see those bumps on that ring. And as always, respect to Bret Hart. You know how many of the greats love him, even the current day ones. And Owen deserves some of that love too, because his performance over this year plus is some top-notch character work and a great way to show how you can elevate somebody. And a great way to show how wins and losses matter and how you can still beat a top person and they can survive. It's also a great example of intertwining stories and keeping Bret and Owen connected, even though they only had 2 matches throughout this entire feud, 2 major matches in the entire feud. It's masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. I hope I know on YouTube there are playlists of the promos and all that. I would implore you to go watch that as well. But you should also, please, be a subscriber at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. You want to watch Bash at Berlin this weekend with us? You can absolutely do so. We would love to have you aboard. Love to talk to you all here. There's the different levels. That is our September watch in terms of the PLE for the month, the pay-per-view for the month, just because of the way the schedule is. But love to have you at any level. Glad to see so many new members out there. Please continue to share this. Please continue to share with your friends. Leave comments. Love to read what you have to say below. Tell me what you remember about this story. Your memories of Bret, your memories of Owen. What is your favorite storyline in pro wrestling? What hooked you? Let us know in the comments below. Hit us up on social media at WrestlingMat23. We would love to hear from you. We really appreciate everybody who's with us here on the Wrestling Mat. Your the subscriptions, the memberships, the support in any way goes such a long way. And I will be back tomorrow. We got to talk about AEW. We got to talk about what's going on heading into Bash Berlin. We will preview that. And I also want to tell you, because the news came through as I was doing this, we are now on Apple Podcasts. We are on the Believe Network. The Believe Network. We're part of it. They wanted the Wrestling Mat. And yes, you can now find us there. Some past episodes have been uploaded already, but it's already on Apple. We'll be coming to all of your favorite podcast distributors, wherever you get your podcast. But this show is not changing at all. It's everything I say here. It'll just be in podcast form. It's another way to enjoy the Wrestling Mat, and I couldn't have done it without all of you and your support. They wanted this show for their very successful podcast network, and they get it, and now so do you. So thanks to everybody at Believe for making this happen. Thanks to you guys for supporting for making this happen. And I'll be back tomorrow to talk about wrestling even more right here on the Wrestling Mat.